Hello, everyone, and welcome. We are so excited. This is our final episode for season 2.
Woo
Woo!
woo! I can't believe it.
I know. And if you've been following along here for a while, you know we preach the foundations. As unsexy as they may be, they are really the most significant pillars of optimizing gut and hormone health. You know, that is the dogma that we preach. And maybe at this point, you've even been applying much of what you've been learning throughout your journey with us and building that stable foundation. So, about now, you might also be thinking, how long is this whole quote unquote healing journey? What am I in for? And how do I know if I'm heading in the right route for me? So, today we're going to dive into the healing timeline with the goal of sharing more insight into what to expect along the journey, symptoms that may shift sooner into your healing journey, and others that might take a little bit more time and want to pay attention to, or maybe need a little more support around. Um, really based on, what Jillian and I see in practice working with our clients. All right. So to start off, probably the most burning question that our clients have is, how long is this journey going to take? So, subjective question right off the bat. We can't kind of tell you overtly, but what we can tell you is a healing journey is a journey. We choose that word very specifically. So low and slow wins the race, which means these changes are not meant to happen overnight. I mean, we can force the body to make quick changes, but as so many of you have probably experienced in the past, those forced quick changes don't often have sticking power, staying power, or really lead to any sort of effective change. Most often they head us in the U-turn us away from our, desired goal, our desired destination. So just to kind of bring it out, the minimum of the timeline for healing that Jillian and I would really share with you would be 6 months. And most often, kind of creating space for your healing journey to expand out to 1 or 2 years, and sometimes even more for certain individuals. So just to clarify, because I know that might be like, whew, all right, was I expecting that? Was that longer than I expected? The goal is to see gradual shifts in your health and reduction or elimination of symptoms along the way throughout that timeline. But some of those bigger symptoms or health dynamics might take that full 1, 2+ years. And we're really going to be diving in today into more of the kind of specifics, the minute shifts and symptoms and things like that to help to give you a little bit more of the signage along the way on your journey so that you do know, with some confidence that you're moving in the right direction. So, the big first area that we like to plug for healing timelines is to assess your mindset and bring awareness to any areas that you might be tempted to rush your body. We visited this conversation in our very first episode. Actually, it was like the very first talking point of our very first episode. So it felt important for us to bring that back to the front line in kind of the conclusion, of season 2 now. So we're going to just take a minute to kind of speak to it again. This idea of destination versus journey. Again, that journey word is something that we choose specifically because we want to explore the idea of what does being healed, when there's like a period at the end of that, like what does that mean to you? And that sometimes that statement, if we think about it, like, oh, this healing journey, and then there's a light switch that happens. It's like, okay, one day I'm just healed. That idea, that black and white kind of shift can be challenging to this process. And we really want to see this as a continual process. So the goal are those gradual improvements and working towards maintenance, where the foundations are still important in that maintenance. We are still doing the practices that help to kind of get us to that destination and keep us in that destination. So we're going to talk more about that today also. And probably the next biggest thing that we see with clients in our community is kind of the downfall of this seeking of instant gratification. And the before versus after kind of photo culture is not helping this mindset, as often we don't see the 1 to 2 years between those photos. and the consistency and even the fluctuations that occur along that journey. So always just allowing yourself to kind of give yourself space and grace, knowing that, we are on this journey and it can be frustrating. And that is okay. Space and grace doesn't mean we're just like cruising through without any, challenges. But jumping ship on those consistent foundation practices before we're seeing things through only creates more frustration and, quite frankly, confusion around what's actually helping you to move in that gradual forward moving direction. And then planting the seed. For a lot of people that are doing the work, the foundations, or even doing the concentrated work with a provider, like working with Jilly or I in our private practice, really seeing those as planting the seed, allowing to let change happen beyond the acute work that you're doing through the practice of those foundations, the insights that you get into your body, the deeper work that you might be doing too. Maybe it's targeted supplements, maybe it's really specific lifestyle shifts, and allowing those to be part of that gradual process also. Those are the seeds that eventually grow. But again, it takes time, consistency, TLC, and, a whole lot of kind of grace for those little seedlings to become like beautiful, flourishing flowers, trees, what have you in your metaphor.
And I love that you use the word process, a gradual process, because I think to your point with social media and the before and afters and this obsession with instant gratification, we often completely lose sight of the process, right? The most important piece in terms of getting to where we want to go with our health. These things do not happen overnight, and focusing on the process and having benchmarks and goals and different things that we can focus on as part of that can be really helpful, because if we just have this one outcome or end goal in mind, and we expect to snap our fingers and get there overnight, we're probably going to be continually disappointed. But I think if we can focus on that process and have those interim benchmarks and things that we can focus our energy and attention on, that's where we can give ourselves more grace and practice patience and all of that on this journey.
Absolutely. I feel like I think of that saying, like, it's like not forgetting to like smell the roses along the way of like, okay, we've got like a very particular rose bush, like way down the way that we're trying to make our way to or become the rose, what have you. But those opportunities to see like the small shifts, the small changes. And yes, maybe it's eliminating constipation is like your big goal, or it's like getting a regular cycle that's, no symptoms is your big goal. And it's kind of like we might have like slow shifts that maybe aren't to do with the constipation or the PMS, but it's, in our energy or in our brain clarity or in like these other areas that you're like, oh, I would have missed those as like the signage along the way to tell me like you're going in the right direction. But if we're so fixated on, that big goal is still not moving, I'm still constipated, I'm still, have what have you, we can miss that we were actually getting a lot of signs along the way to tell us, that we are going in the right direction. And to kind of close this out in terms of, what's not part of our healing journey, our severe reactions are not part of progress. So for some of you, you might be familiar with the terms like Herxheimer reactions or like die off. We might hear these in like the functional medicine world. Sometimes when we're kind of working either with a provider or maybe we're using kind of a really aggressive supplement routine or something, or changing our diet really radically. And we're almost like built in to believe that like, oh, these are good things. Like we should feel like total crap before we feel better. That means that we're going in the right direction, right? And that is not the case. That is very much not the way that Jillian and I practice or the belief that we have behind our practice. We always want to be matching how fast or how slow our unique body wants us to move through the process of healing. And that part, the speed at which we move, is our responsibility as we move through this journey. So pushing ourselves harder or faster does not mean that we're going to progress to our end result. any more quickly, quite frankly, it's just going to equal more stress and more depletion on the body. So, we might need to adjust along the way to say, ooh, I'm feeling a little like my symptoms are getting worse, or maybe there is, some of those responses happening in the body. And that's the opportunity to just pull back a little bit, slow down, do less, invite in more of the fundamentals, reassess your checklist, and many of the things that we're going to be talking about today.
And I love that you point that out as well. I cannot tell you how many women I work with that unfortunately have worked with functional providers that have blasted them with all sorts of detox supplements, potent herbal antimicrobial formulas, and different products that their body was just not ready for. They weren't prepped and primed with the foundations that we cover in this podcast. They didn't kind of support the right pieces of detoxification before ramping things up, or supporting, drainage, as we've talked about here quite a bit. So, as practitioners, and I think this is helpful for, you guys as consumers as well as practitioners out there doing this work. It's so important to be methodical and to make sure that you're not taxing the body and creating more stress, even though we want to move forward, we want to push through things. But this work is going to be much more enjoyable, and you will be much more successful if you are, moving low and slow and methodically through this process. So, this is a little PSA for anyone out there that might be working with someone, or maybe they're trying to do some things on their own and they're having lots of herx reactions, or, detox reactions, or different things going on. Just sort of pausing and recognizing that, yes, some of these responses can occur, but that is a sign that we need to adjust. We need to course correct. We need to identify what needs to be supported to create space for effective healing.
100% agree.
So let's talk a little bit more about the expectation with the healing timeline that Abby kind of started to dive into. And also, let's talk a bit more about symptom shifts and things that, we can potentially monitor on our healing journey. So, as Abby mentioned, everyone's timeline is going to be different. The context of what's going on with their health, how long their history is and what's been going on. So lots of factors are going to drive how you respond and what your healing timeline looks like. There's no one set timeline that is appropriate for everyone. With that being said, we do want to provide you with some general guidance that might be helpful if you're on that healing journey and you're trying to determine whether or not you're on the right path. So the first thing, as always, that we recommend, is the mindset, and also tapping into how your body is communicating with you, and really making observations and creating awareness around subtle signs and symptom shifts that indicate you are moving in the right direction. Those bigger goals can often take a bit longer. So Abby mentioned, regulating your cycle, or eliminating period related symptoms, eliminating chronic constipation. Maybe you are looking to, get pregnant naturally and you've been struggling with that for some time. These are some amazing goals that are absolutely achievable, but they may take longer. So sometimes it stinks to have to, sit with that, but it doesn't mean that there's not going to be a lot of interim progress in the meantime as you're working towards that. So this is where the kind of sub goals or different indicators to track to know that you're moving in the right direction can be really helpful. Some specific signs could be movement with energy. If you're someone that continually gets that afternoon slump or crash, noticing some improvements there and having more consistent, stable energy throughout the day is a really great sign. Improvements with mood and anxiety can be a great indicator that we're moving in the right direction and feeling overall stable, through that lens. Also, things like sleep. So maybe we're falling asleep more easily. We're staying asleep and getting more restful, restorative sleep, and we're not waking up in the early hours of the morning anymore. That would be a great indicator that the diet and lifestyle supplement changes you're making are having a positive impact, and the body is responding in a really great way. Some improvements with skin. So maybe our skin is more hydrated. Maybe we're experiencing less breakouts, or we are seeing improvements with things like eczema all would be amazing indicators that, the body is responding. Decreases with PMS symptoms. And I do want to preface this one by saying that depending on what's going on for you hormonally, sometimes things can get a little bit worse before they get better. There should still be progress alongside that with things like, say, energy, mood, and sleep. But if we have a lot of issues with estrogen, as an example, as we are supporting estrogen and maybe we have a lot of estrogen dumping or things going on that are increasing our estrogen load temporarily, which is kind of a necessary piece of the process for some women, we might notice an uptick with PMS symptoms for a month or two before we start to see the dust settle and really see improvements there. But PMS symptoms and having, less cramping, less moodiness, more stability with digestion and sleep, those would all be indicators that we're moving in the right direction. And you might observe some of those shifts earlier on. Also, seeing improvements with your mindset. I know that's not something maybe we typically celebrate, but if you notice that you are making more supportive decisions, you are assessing the why behind your decisions and your behaviors, and you are, pulling yourself away from the restrictive kind of deprivation mindset approach, and you're making more decisions through that abundance mindset and that supportive mindset, that's a huge win. That's a huge, important piece of progress that we want to make sure that we celebrate. And then also digestion. And like Abby mentioned, there can be some digestive health dynamics that take much longer to work through and to see really significant progress with. But there might be digestive symptoms that we do see progress with earlier on. Maybe it's some improvements with bloating and we're really supporting digestion and experiencing less bloating after meals or at the end of the day. Maybe we are seeing some movement and improvements with bowel movements and frequency or consistency. So those would be some kind of outward things that you could pay attention to really assess that interim progress. And sometimes that helps us to just feel more connected to the journey, to say, all right, these things are improving. And yes, I am still working towards that, bigger end goal or goals, but my body is giving me signals that it is liking what I am doing and it wants me to keep doing this and moving in this direction.
Those are so helpful and such like kind of concrete examples, because I think this is the biggest thing. Like this is what Jillian and I spend most of our time doing, like reframing clients to say like, hey, look at this tree. Oh, look at that tree. Look at all the, I want to call them goalposts, but the like signage along the journey that like we are going in the right direction, and rebuilding like that confidence, which is so helpful to have a guide to help to be like very overt in pointing out these dynamics. But we can do these things in our own lives, especially when now we know a little bit more of what to look for. And even in the micro, I have like Sarah's voice in my head from our like Benjamin Button episode, when she like her voice when she's like, girl, restrict, like even like having like that little, it's like the devil on your shoulder of like, come on, you haven't seen like a goalpost in a while, like let's do the naughty thing that we like want to just jump ship and try to get this instant gratification. And it's kind of like, okay, you like flick them off, you're like, no, we're going to stay true. So practicing and exercising that muscle of mindset is like such a major part.
Oh my gosh, it's so important and probably one of the hardest pieces of the process, in our experience with clients. So we don't discredit that it is challenging. And we just want to highlight that it is an active process in terms of working on that mindset, especially as you're on that very non-linear healing journey. One other thing I want to point out that I feel is relevant, really could be relevant for anyone, but I do feel is particularly relevant for a lot of our female listeners, which is the goal of weight loss or seeing shifts with body composition. And this goal, like Abby and I have talked about a lot, we very much respect any individual's desire to want to see shifts with weight or to feel really amazing in their body. But weight is often one of the last things to shift, particularly if we have a history of chronic restrictive dieting, if we have a lot of gut imbalances, inflammation, hormonal issues. We really need to support these things first and not try to force the weight loss, which can lead us to kind of working against ourselves. And I think of this particular client example where I worked with this really amazing individual who wanted to see shifts with weight. She also was dealing with PCOS and super long cycles, had a super high follicle count, was really constipated, go in the bathroom like every 3 days, cystic acne. And in our time together, she was able to clear up her acne, get her cycle regular, and at like 32, 33 days, which was awesome, and was having daily bowel movements. Energy was great. We saw so many positive signs from her body that we were grooving in the right direction, but we weren't seeing shifts with weight. And this was a topic of conversation really at each of our sessions, because there was, a fixation on this weight and feeling like, man, I'm a failure because I haven't, seen the shifts with weight that I want to. And this is one of my big goals. And with working through the mindset pieces, once she could really reframe that, and allow her body some space and really just kind of approach things with more neutrality, more acceptance, we started to see things shift. But it took a lot longer than these other things. And for some individuals, that journey might look very different, but I feel like it's important to call out the weight goal, because we respect it and we respect your desire if that's relevant for you. But particularly with weight, we can often see the mindset creating so many roadblocks, and also kind of serving as a distraction and just really overshadowing all of the incredible progress the body is making, outside of weight.
Yeah. And I think, our society, including even, our medical society, kind of has very much created this like weight equals health. Like when you lose weight, you automatically are, healthy and you're moving in a healthy direction. And like that should be the result of healthy behaviors. And when you're, in the perfect client example that you just shared, like she's doing all the right things and this weight is not moving, but like if she's looking at the signs and the conversations with her body, it's like, okay, well, I am working in the right direction, like I am getting all of this validation, I am getting these positive shifts, but your body will not release that protective, you know kind of energy until it's ready to release it. And that's where, the forcefulness in that kind of conversation, if we're going to try to force weight loss, would be going against everything that would be laying the foundation to take to that, ultimate goal. So I think it's very much, it's asking us to work kind of against the grain of so much of what we've been overtly and even like subliminally kind of told throughout our entire life in the relation of like weight and health, which those, are not synonymous, often, especially in the healing journey. We do want our bodies to come to a place of like stable weight that's easy to maintain with the foundations that we practice. But that doesn't mean that that's going to happen overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, just highlights the fact too that, the mindset is so key. And also, um, we often need to connect with other measures of progress, and actually truly connect with that, because us just telling you that these things are important isn't going to make it meaningful for you. But really assessing for you what is important, what are the signs that you're seeing, how is that feeling in your body, and really kind of tuning inward. And generally in terms of implementing new diet, lifestyle, supplement changes, whether it be foundational, or if you have a foundation built and you're working with Abby or myself or another provider on kind of deeper dive interventions, we really recommend giving things a full 3 months. We have to give things time, and we have to give the body time to respond, to really understand whether or not these things are working, or if we need to kind of course correct or troubleshoot. So during that time, you can monitor some of the indicators that we just mentioned. And if we are starting to see those positive shifts, even subtle shifts with the energy, the mood, the sleep, these are really good signs that we're moving in the right direction, and that we likely need to focus on consistency, patience, and doing some fine tuning along the way. Monitoring feedback from your body will give you the ability to make adjustments and to fine tune as you're working through things. So just really take the time to get to know your body and know how it's communicating with you, and just don't overlook those subtle shifts and wins that your body is giving you, and kind of telling you that it is responding and it is liking what you are doing. So we need to give the body at least 3 months for those new changes. And 6 months is usually an appropriate timeline for seeing, more significant changes with your symptoms and your health. Um, Abby and I both require a 6-month commitment from our one-on-one clients, because it is really important to give your body enough time, especially when you're working through gut and hormone dynamics. We have to give the body enough time to actually respond so we can, see things through. For some clients we work with, they may achieve symptom resolution at the end of 6 months, which is wonderful. For other clients, like Abby mentioned, it could be a 1 to 2 year plus journey. And that's not to discourage you. It's just to really be honest, but also to get you excited about monitoring other things and other ways that we're progressing in the meantime. So typically when the journey is longer, we have more complex, health dynamics that we are working through. It's also very normal and expected to hit road bumps on a healing journey, as we've mentioned, since healing is very non-linear. But we also want to call out some specific roadblocks that we commonly see preventing clients from making significant progress or achieving that symptom resolution. So, some of the core issues that we will see that create really big roadblocks for individuals are: one, neglecting nervous system support or nervous system dysregulation. Simply put, the body cannot heal in a chronic state of fight or flight. If you have significant emotional stressors in your life, if you have significant physical stressors in your life, and you are inundating your body with under fueling, over exercising, it is going to be very, very, very challenging to see results. So the nervous system is key. And would you agree, Abby, that the nervous system is a pretty big piece of things, whether it be gut, hormones, or something else?
I think it's one of the biggest, and I think why it's overlooked so often or undervalued is because it's not as tangible, and often kind of asks us to do some of the things that maybe we are a little resistant to doing, like, oh wait, you want me to reduce my weightlifting or my like spin classes, or you want me to eat more? Like, I've been spending my entire life trying to eat less and like celebrating not having an appetite, and even slow down and like chew our food. That's a nervous system practice. Also, a eating hygiene practice that is great for digestion, but it's really how our body physically communicates with the nervous system. So it's like all of these practices are kind of asking us to go against the grain of what like our entire go 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 world is, suggesting to us is like the way to wherever we want to go, but really it's that kind of some of those like subtler, softer practices that are really going to like pave the way.
Yeah, and it is often uncomfortable, especially in the go 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 world, to slow down. And I dealt with this on my own healing journey, and I work with a lot of clients that are, more type A, and they're like, give me all the supplements, give me more of, this strategy, or, this goal or that goal, I'll tackle anything. But when it comes to the nervous system, they're like, oh my gosh, like, what do you mean slow down? This is crazy talk. It's hard. It's hard to slow down. And we've talked about this quite a bit as well throughout both seasons, but we don't see rest as being productive, right? And that's where Abby and I talk a lot about productive rest and how these outlets for your body and nervous system support, even just small outlets, can be so powerful for opening the body up to healing. So I think it's just important to call out this nervous system barrier, since it is a big one for a lot of us. And sometimes we might not perceive stress with our, kind of conscious, rational brains, but our body is perceiving stress in a big way. So, stress is a big piece of things, mindset, which we already talked about, and then environmental barriers. So, this is one that I feel like is talked about a lot less, but both Abby and I see a lot of this in practice. So, environmental roadblocks could mean issues with your physical environment, like having a mold source or mold exposure at home. That is actually preventing you from healing or, driving illness and dysfunction in your body. If there is suspected, mold in your environment or, some type of exposure making you sick, we certainly recommend connecting with a functional provider and getting support for actually navigating that. But and that's not to scare you, but it's something to have on your radar that we do see, since these exposures are a little bit more common than we think. And if the body is not responding to what we are doing, that's where we want to start asking some questions so that we're not, kind of floundering on this journey, and we can, really get at the root of the problem. Environmental barriers could also mean a toxic work environment or a toxic home environment that is taxing chronically your body and really closing your body up to healing.
I think the episode that we did with Krista on really talking about kind of stress and the nervous system, she hits on this topic really well. So that's a good episode to kind of go back to, more to like kind of the toxic work or home environment. Like, just even the concept of like not feeling supported. And maybe it's not feeling supported in your like the changes that you're making in your life to support your health. Maybe that's changing, the way your family dynamic is or your relationship or something like that. And those are again a little bit of more of like the soft touch pieces, but that can be really taxing to ourselves, our nervous system, and the things that we're inviting in. So we do want to look at the holistic picture, which not only has to do with looking at the whole body, but also looking at the environment that surrounds the body as well. So healing toolkits. So now that you're on the journey and you know a little bit more about how long and what to expect, we want to talk about some healing toolkits and how these toolkits are kind of what travel with you for the long term. As we don't arrive at healing, which we've kind of discussed, but we want to kind of continue the practice, certainly continuing the practice of those foundations, but revisiting this toolkit when, there are inevitable bumps that come up along, the journey of life that we could call it. Um, so, kind of our first little packet in our toolkit is really discovering and practicing the things that anchor you to your body. And this is, a lot of maybe a little bit more in that nervous system arm of the conversation. Could be things like meditation, breath work, walks. So, like gentle movement, um, time in nature, journaling, therapy, talking it out with a friend, just kind of doing like that dump. Really getting curious and building out a couple of different practices that help you to feel like you can kind of get perspective if there's a lot of just maybe it's busyness in your mind or maybe it's disconnect with your body. So you kind of you're like me, you live in your head a lot of the time, and the practices that personally I need a lot of in my life are the ones that bring me back to my physical body. So those are more of like the breath work, physically touching my body, going for walks out in nature to kind of like feel the movement of my body and kind of feel my shoulders finally come out away from my ears and let myself come out of my head and back into the body. So, just to share some of the things in my own personal life, but those take some practice and curiosity to say, like, what does help me to feel kind of connected and rooted and grounded, and then practice them often. Like we're talking every day and build that toolkit. Jilly, do you have any practices that work really well for you?
So, a couple things that really kind of ground me, and I'm similar to you in that I live in my head often, and I have to engage in things that kind of physically bring me into my body, or really get me into the energy that I want to be in, and kind of operating in the frequency that I want to be in. And I think the core things that come to mind for me are morning walks. So getting outside first thing, getting that fresh air, getting that sunlight, and just moving. Breath work is a really big one for me. Sometimes it's a short breath work session, other times it's a longer breath work session. When I don't want to do breath work, I know that's when I need it the most. When I'm resistant to it, I know that okay, this is time where I really need to connect and get on my mat and engage in breath work, even if it's a short session. And then the other tool that I actually really love is And I'll do this sometimes in between client sessions throughout the day, or if I have different kind of transition points in my work day, which is turning on some music and actually just like physically shaking out my body and, moving my energy around, moving my body around physically. And it is so amazing what a jam plus moving your body and shaking it out will do for your energy, your mood, your mindset, for just sort of reconnecting with yourself for the remainder of your day. So those are the three things that come to mind for me that I feel like really anchor me day to day.
I love that. I love the shaking. I mean, we even look at like if like an animal falls or something or gets scared, they'll literally shake themselves, like kind of, and that's like to move, yeah, move that energy like out of the body. Energy needs to move. I feel like I dance a lot of like in like my kitchen alone. I don't video myself doing any of these dances. And I think more purposefully being like, okay, this song, and I'm going like, it's like making that like, okay, this is what we're doing right here, like that intentional practice.
And it has to be a throwback jam that's like really embarrassing. Like it's funny, my sister-in-law, Marwa, and I will send each other songs that we like jam out to and like release stress to, and it'll be like, a 2000s hip hop song, or like, Ja Rule or something ridiculous. Um, just something you can like get out of your head and jam out to, and move your body. So
I love it. We're gonna need a collection of our go-to like jam out
shake it
like
out songs.
yes, the shake it out songs. Perfect. So
Yeah.
if anyone has any good shake it out songs, we're all open ears for those.
Send them our way.
Yeah. A continuous conversation with your body and your symptoms. We really kind of hit on that pretty hard where Jilly was kind of sharing, but that idea of this is continuous. So we're always listening and responding to our symptoms. We're always seeing our symptoms as opportunities. They are conversations that our body is having with us. They might not be the conversation that we want our body to be having with us at that moment in time, but they are still conversations. And our responsibility is to respond to them. It might be temptation to be like mad or frustrated or like that belief of like, I'm broken. But going to the place of like, all right, body, I hear you. You're telling me something. And then kind of assessing like, all right, have I been, going through those foundations? Is there opportunities that we've, maybe kind of slacked on a little bit, or maybe we've just packed on a lot and we've been burning the candle at both ends. Maybe we've been traveling, maybe, kind of going through and saying like, all right, where maybe have I not had so many, miss out on some of these opportunities for support, and kind of reassessing there. And knowing as we start to understand our story, our body's story, kind of what are those, practices of, oh, it's definitely the sleep. It's, the shake it out. It's, I just need like a little bit more movement and light exposure, and a lot of those kind of foundations. And we want to normalize that the body is always in flux. The goal is that we are establishing greater resilience in our body and greater resilience to the stressors of travel, the stressors of a poor night's sleep, the stressors of, maybe not having the most optimal diet because of multitudes of influences or things like that. And being like, okay, that didn't like totally throw my life for a whirlwind. Maybe I don't feel my most optimal, but I can persist through this. I have resilience. But the reality is that we are not ever going to be invincible to stressors. That is so, so important to allow ourselves to be okay with, and knowing that the story that our body tells us when we're stressed, that those are when we kind of come back to like, okay, again, plugging into the foundations, plugging into the consistency and the things that brought us to this space of, our journey, our maintenance, wherever we find ourselves on that. So really filling your toolkit with some of these kind of foundations. And I think the best way for us to kind of share some of these maybe is even in, examples of like toolkits that we might utilize with like clients. Um, and, I think for in the kind of gut health world and things that I work on with clients, when we're getting maybe to like a good place, and we're starting to talk about like, okay, future, like let's set you up with, if there are bumps in the road, or if you are traveling, or if you have like a, a big wedding that you go to, and we're maybe having like some extra drinks or different foods, or again, we're not totally in control of our environment. Like, and you might notice like, oh, kind of feeling a little my gut's a little more sensitive, or my heartburn came back, or, I missed a day of a bowel movement. Like, what are some of the things that, we can kind of do, and what would we guide clients in those situations for? And really, these foundations of coming back to, practicing slowing down at meal times, these like unsexy eating hygiene, chewing, sitting down, like kind of making sure, like, are we eating three, well, however many kind of robust meals that make us feel really satisfied, having that meal, that first meal within 1 to 2 hours of waking, so that we're kind of coming back to the consistency and the circadian rhythm with which we want to, wake our body up and our kind of metabolic function. Um, Thinking of also like our gut barrier. And these are some of the tools that we might use, like a supplement tool. Maybe there's a kind of supplement that we utilized in practice together. Often there's a lot of powders that help with gut healing in terms of certain nutrients and kind of compounds that can help to heal the cellular and the mucosal barrier. And we might bring, say, like, okay, that's an actual supplement tool now in your toolkit. Let's bring that guy in. Any bumps in the road, invite him back in. That's like glutamine and mucilaginous, like marshmallow and slippery elm and aloe, and things that just are like, whew, like nice and soothing. We might say, all right, invite one of those things in. But there's also food sources that can do that. So we might remind, like, hey, let's bring back in some more of those like kind of ground flax seeds and chia seeds in that mucilaginous category. Bring back in more of the soluble fibers from our root vegetables. Cook all of your veggies. This isn't the time for roughage in your diet. Let's go to more cooked foods and really be kind of gentle on the GI system. Those are really a lot of the places that I start with clients, with those kind of foundations to say, hey, let's just soothe it on down. Let's give the gut a number, like a TLC, like love it up. It's really what I call it in practice. I say, we're going to love up on your gut. And then at a certain point, my clients understand. They're like, oh yeah, I'm loving up on my gut. So anytime after travel, like, oh, I just got to love up on my gut. I'm like, are you? So that idea of, all right, we can revisit that toolkit of just those kind of examples, knowing that if the story that your body tells is a gut health story, like, I mean, I will share, like, if I am burning the candle at both ends and, going from a wedding weekend and travel and all these things, like, my digestive system might slow down a little bit. And it's kind of like, okay, I know exactly how I've gotten myself here. Now, how am I going to start to put the foundations to kind of help to ease out some things? And those are still very much of the same practices that I will utilize in my own body.
And I think it's just so important to normalize all of this. And ideally, with time, we are improving resiliency with the body. So when we deviate and if there's some symptoms that are popping up, we can put some of these supportive things in place and the body recalibrates. If you're really early on in the trenches of your healing journey, um, disruptions to your routine and things that are aggravating the gut or the hormones or the nervous system might feel a little bit more derailing, but that is not your forever story. And so we have to, again, think about the context of where we are on our own healing journey and know that it is possible to really improve the resilience and to get to an amazing place. But it doesn't mean that we're immune to having disruptions or having a symptom pop up. It doesn't mean that we're failing or our body's rebelling against us. It's, again, just that sign or signal or a way that your body's communicating with you. And over time, and this is what Abby and I do for ourselves as well as do with clients. When we really learn and understand our bodies, we can start to be proactive, right? So if we're going into that wedding weekend, we can bring those tools. When we're coming home from the weekend away or the travel or the disrupted routine, we kind of know exactly what we need to bring in to support our body in recalibrating and getting back to a solid baseline. And we can give ourselves a little bit more grace in terms of, yep, these disruptions happen, things feel a little bit off, but I know that if I bring in these supportive tools, my body will get back to that baseline, and this is a normal part of the process. So, I love that we're normalizing this conversation. And in terms of another kind of quick example of where this might be relevant from a hormone perspective. I work with many women that have really, severe or significant, PMS issues or issues specific to imbalances with estrogen detox, excess estrogen production, or low progesterone levels. And, we can work through these things effectively and get things to a great place. However, some women have a genetic tendency towards issues with estrogen, and meaning the way that their genetics are might impair their ability to, say, break down estrogens as efficiently as someone without this genetic picture. So with that individual, we know that um, they may experience more issues with estrogen if there are certain disruptions in their life. So in that case, we would set them up with a toolkit for, being proactive with supporting healthy estrogen metabolism and balancing estrogen and progesterone. And we would work to really understand their body and for the client to understand their body in terms of, okay, when are things feeling a little bit off, and when do I know that I need to bring in more support for estrogen? Maybe I'm, using more of my castor oil packs before ovulation and pre-period. I'm bringing in more of my cruciferous veggies and broccoli sprouts for the sulforaphane. I'm amping up my fiber intake, to support estrogen binding and elimination. I'm trying to nail my protein. So it's really all about, having that foundation and then having a toolkit that is unique to you to support your body long term, knowing that there's going to be bumps in the road no matter where you're at on your journey.
Absolutely. And, part of that curiosity, we can start to kind of assemble and start, right now, if you're listening and you're like, well, I haven't worked with anyone, like, I don't know, some of these pieces. It's like, start with the foundations. Like, again, we're a broken record and we will continue to be a broken record. But I know for some people, this might feel like, oh my gosh, like, okay, totally understanding and I'm cruising forward. For others, it's like, wow, this might feel overwhelming and maybe highlight a lot of things that I don't know yet. And that's really, again, where it's like those fundamentals they are so much of what are going to carry to the finish line, as, again, unsexy as they truly might sound.
Speaking of unsexy, um, let's talk about what to focus on, a little bit more so on your healing journey outside of these kind of toolkits that we're describing. So, how do we support a successful healing journey? First up, habit creation, the least sexy thing to talk about in the entire world. But really, it's all about the habits. Your health is in the habits at the end of the day. And habits are really the small, consistent ways that you show up for yourself and your body day in and day out. Doesn't mean consistency, doesn't mean perfection, but it means, really showing up as consistently as possible with the small supportive habits. And these are the things that don't feel hugely impactful in the moment, but really lead to big positive shifts with health and symptoms over time. So, we want to cover some specific tips for how to effectively create habits that are actually going to stick long term. As Abby mentioned, sometimes we see individuals, trying to change too much at once or integrating things that are not sustainable. In which case, where is that going to lead us? Probably, maybe a little bit of progress, but then often, a backslide. So, in terms of creating habits, these are some specific tips. First up, habit stacking. This is one that we love, and habit stacking essentially means adding a new habit to an already existing habit. So it makes it a little bit easier. One example of habit stacking would be if you are working to increase your protein intake in the morning and you are already drinking coffee every morning. You have a ritual, a routine, a habit around your coffee in the morning. So maybe what we do, instead of trying to find another totally different time to plug in that protein, maybe we start by adding some unflavored protein powder or collagen powder directly to our coffee. So we're getting protein and coffee in at the same time. Or maybe we boil a batch of eggs at the beginning of the week and we have them on hand so we can grab a couple boiled eggs and eat those alongside our coffee in the morning. So we're habit stacking.
A lot of kind of coming back to our like nervous system piece is, when can we kind of build in some of those practices? And it might be when we're doing something that feels like soothing and supportive. So maybe it's in the evening when you make yourself a cup of tea. And it's like, okay, this cup of tea is also when I'm going to do some breath work, or I'm going to journal, or I'm going to, do one of those like softer, maybe more supportive practices that um, maybe doesn't feel as like tied down as like a physical like cup of tea. Or I have a red light and I like to call it my activity light. And when I turn that on, I usually sit in front of it in the morning. It's like part of that routine. It's kind of like when the light's on, this is my window of time that I do my journaling and I read an inspiring book or a couple pages of it. And I, um, you know, do a couple other little activities that I really enjoy that help me to feel kind of connected to myself. Or I've, had some clients for like a birthday or something ask for a sauna blanket. And then when they're in their sauna blanket, they're like, okay, now I do my meditations. Now I do my breath work. Now I do like my other kind of softer things. And we don't necessarily need these fancy objects to do that tying down. Like even that cup of tea is kind of like, okay, this is a physical practice that helps to open up the time and the space, and that even the little like mental like light bulb goes off to be like, oh yeah, I said I was going to do this at the same time as this. All right, here I am.
Yeah, I love that. And another one that we had talked about, I think in our episode with Meg on breathwork, was habit stacking breathwork and meals. So if you're, trying to integrate breathwork or, more nervous system support, and you're, tight on time and you have a busy schedule, maybe you use mealtime as an opportunity to pause, take a few slow, deep belly breaths before eating, which is going to prep and prime the body for optimal digestion. But it's going to be a nice little outlet for the nervous system. So just thinking about how you can stack habits together or stack a new habit onto an existing habit is a great way to bring in new habits without creating more overwhelm or putting more demands on your time. Another tip is creating the path of least resistance, which we pretty much just talked about in terms of breaking down barriers to the new habit you want to integrate. Another example would be like if you want to get out for morning walks. It sounds silly, but it actually makes a big difference. Maybe you put your alarm on the other side of the room, so you have to get out of bed to turn the alarm off. And maybe you get some, comfy workout clothes or, exercise clothes out, and you set them aside so you're not having to, dig around and look for clothes and do all the things in the morning. So just breaking down barriers or creating that path of least resistance can make a big difference. And lastly, making it fun, making it enjoyable. These things shouldn't feel miserable or like they're taking away from your life. Ideally, they should feel like they're adding to your life. And the example I always love to give here is with like meal prep or food prep, where this is going to look different for everyone based on their life and what they like to do. But for a lot of individuals I work with, doing some form of prep, even if it's just like roasting some veggies or some starchy veg, is really helpful to get them set up for a successful week with nutrition in terms of how they want to fuel their body. And what we don't want to be doing is trudging our way to the kitchen and feeling resentful and not wanting to do that. And what I want to think about here is, how can we make this fun? How can we make it enjoyable? Maybe we're throwing on some fun music or silly TV show, or maybe we invite our partner or a friend into the mix and say, hey, do you want to food prep together and just kind of hang out and make this a social time? So thinking about how you can make these habits fun and enjoyable, because then they are a lot more likely to stick and be sustainable in your life.
I'm like, I watch like The Bachelorette when I those types of shows when I like food prep, because I'm like, I don't really have to watch them other than like all of a sudden I'm like, she said what? Like,
I know. I'm like, rewind,
no,
rewind.
totally. I'm like, oh,
What
I
happened on
missed that.
Vanderpump?
Yeah. But I watch terrible television sometimes, but I really like probably doesn't help my nervous system, but it does help my food prep.
Trash TV is a form of therapy, in my opinion.
I'm glad we're in
So
agreement here.
I'm on board.
Yeah.
So those are just some tips for actual habit creation. And then a couple other things to think about, or really to help with the sustainability of these habits, would be really identifying and understanding your why. So the first step with creating habits and really making them stick is getting clear on your why, right? Why are we incorporating or implementing these strategies and trying to create habits around them? Doing something because Abby or myself told you that it's good for you or that you should do it is not going to last long at all. We really need to connect with ourselves on a deeper level and start to align our thoughts and our behaviors with the life that we want to create for ourselves. This is that purpose-driven behavior change. So, the most common example of this is when clients tell me that they should be going to the gym, but it never happens and they're consistently feeling bad about it. Doing something just because we think we should is very ineffective and fleeting, and should is like an awful guilt-ridden word. I hate the word should. There's nothing that you should be doing. So my question in this case, if a client was saying, I should be doing this, I should be going to the gym, is why do you want to move your body? Why is it important to you? What is it that you actually like to do and what feels good for your body? Sometimes clients are like stumped when I ask them these questions because they haven't really thought about it before. And, they are kind of going through the motions or trying to force themselves to do something that maybe they don't really want to do, or maybe it's not the right approach for them. So connecting with your why and really aligning all of these pieces can, help with the creation and the sustainability of these habits.
Yeah, don't shit all over yourself.
Should that be the title of this
Oh
episode?
my
No.
God, yes.
That was good. So continually, revisit your motives, connect with your why. It's really powerful when we do take the time to do that. Ditch the perfectionist mentality, the self-defeating thoughts. Perfectionism is really the thief of progress when it comes to health and wellness. There is no such thing as perfection. Abby and I will be the first to tell you that. So it's really important to get comfortable with this early on in your journey. Otherwise, we are setting ourselves up for failure and for a lot of stress. So know that perfection doesn't exist, and any type of intentional imperfect progress is progress. Shit, I messed that up. Sorry. Any type of imperfect action is progress, even if it doesn't feel that way in the moment. And a few other final tips here. Maybe consider using a habit tracker or setting SMART goals, or really just bringing more intention to the week. Sometimes, if you're in the midst of a healing journey, it, it can feel like we're focusing on a lot of things, and over time it can get a little bit murky. So something I like clients to do is to bring some intention to the week. What are the two things that I'm going to focus on this week in terms of supporting my body, or a habit that I want to work on? So get specific there, and that can be really helpful for providing clarity on the journey and for giving you the ability to assess, okay, how did this week go? And if I wasn't able to incorporate that nervous system support as much as I had wanted to, how can I break down the barriers so I can, next week maybe be a little bit more consistent there. Also, making observations, being open to trial and error. And as we've said like 50 times in this episode, being patient, being flexible in this process. And lastly, last but not least, find joy in the journey. Do not wait to find joy in your day-to-day life for when, you've reached X, Y, and Z goal. It is okay to want to see progress with certain markers and to still find joy and happiness in the process. And we see so many individuals that are like sidelined from their life because they are working towards X, Y, and Z goal, and it is super all consuming. And sometimes symptoms can be very loud, and we need to quiet those so that we can be more present. But we just really want to drive home the fact that it is so incredibly important to allow yourself to find joy in the process here and now, alongside that healing journey.
That one like pulls on my heart. Like when you said it and when I think about it, like I mean, so much in, even in my own health journey, and I know so much with clients, and that idea of like, I'll be happy when, and we put it off into the future, or I'll be, whatever we believe that, I think we see it so much in like the weight loss conversation of like, when I get to XYZ size, like everything's just going to like figure it out. Or, we could even see it with people and money and like, so many things of like, we put off this ability to like plug into our life. And the first place to start with that so much is like, how do we plug into our body? How do we plug into the present moment? How do we plug into our physical body? and kind of come out of our intellectual brain and kind of plug into like the amazing body that you do have in this very moment. And I think that that moment of like, okay, I can't change anything right now, but I can be present and I can kind of put, one foot in front of the other in those like attainable, measurable kind of steps and the foundations. But really allowing ourselves to like call it out in the moment of like, all right, I'm trying to live in the future here and I am like creating this like tension. How can I practice in, bringing myself into the moment? And that's so much of the things that we kind of put into the toolkits and really focused on today of like, what is my why? And what are those practices that bring me in connection to myself? That's really, I think, the first place to start when we catch ourselves in that. And, that is a practice that we need to kind of probably continuously come back to, and it will get easier and easier. Everything is kind of that muscle when it comes to that mindset and that reframing.
Yeah, and I think this is a really great note to kind of wrap things up on. And I think we just want to encourage you to find joy in your day-to-day life, to connect with your body. You deserve to experience joy, to be present in your life here and now while you are still working on your health and progressing through symptoms.